All right, so I'm introducing Dr. Horton. Dr. Devin Horton is the Graduate Diversity Officer for STEM disciplines at UC Davis. She earned her PhD in Cellular and Molecular Biology from the University of Michigan in 2009. She has over 10 years of experience in teaching and program development as an assistant professor and assistant director of undergraduate research. Since 2019, she has served as a graduate diversity officer at UC Davis. Her experience as a first-generation socioeconomically disadvantaged student fuels her passion for providing effective and comprehensive student support. Thank you so much, Devin, for joining the summit today.
Absolutely. Can everybody hear me now?
Yep.
Perfect. So what I did was I called in on my phone because everybody has 9,000 Zoom accounts at this point, and I'm going to attempt to share from the computer. So fingers crossed. Let's see. Oh, yes, that's okay. Desktop.
So I made one of your accounts a co-host so that you can boot me off and share.
Yeah, I'm on that one. That's what I'm on. Yeah. I'm on that one. I just have to figure out the correct thing to share because
perfect.
The other thing is I'm on a Google Chromebook instead of a real laptop. No offense, Google Chromebook people. But because of that, things were a little bit different. I accidentally left my work laptop at home when I drove down to LA. So I'm in LA because COVID. Okay. Can everyone see? Well, it's loading. All right, are we good?
Yep.
Okay, perfect. So interestingly, at the top of this talk, the speaker whose name I can't remember, I don't remember who spoke first, but she mentioned that like pipeline can be a bit of a word. And so I thought that was really interesting and telling because that's pretty much how I'm starting off my talk. But today I hope to tell you a little bit about where I came from, some of the experiences that shaped my trajectory, a little bit of information from my original job talk that kind of fuels what I do as the diversity officer, and then some resources for those of you who are interested in allyship, in learning more about the experiences of folks from historically excluded populations. There's a lot of resources that I list, but they're all very good and very digestible because I realize that if I don't want to take things in big chunks, I don't think anybody else does either. So, leaky pipeline to where? When we say the words leaky pipeline, we're making a lot of assumptions about what the end goal is. And you've seen these images all over the place, and all of this talk and all of these thoughts about the quote leaky pipeline tends to focus on the people who are supposedly falling out of said pipeline, which is another way in which we end up putting the burden and the work of fixing things onto the people who are actually the victims of oppression. So I don't particularly ascribe to this idea of a pipeline because there are many different paths for people who want to pursue graduate degrees. It makes a lot of assumptions when we use that term. It presumes that not just that the PhD is the end goal, but also that a faculty position in academia is the end goal, and that isn't always the case. Luckily, institutions are starting to move away from the idea by developing and instituting career advising and exploration things for graduate students. This is true at UC Davis. There's a senior career advisor whose job is solely to work with graduate students in STEM disciplines. So those folks who want to do careers outside of academia and in faculty positions. But of course, many of the funded efforts by NIH, NSF, Ford, all of these other fancy places that give us all the money, they typically have the PhD as the end goal. So that still tends to drive a lot of our conversations. So today, when I'm talking to you about the things that have happened or experiences that I have, they are in the context of the PhD in academia as the end goal. I just want to make sure that we're all clear that this isn't always inevitable. So this is the disclaimer that I always put on every presentation that I give because it's true, but also in the current climate, it's even more important. So it is not the job of the oppressed to enlighten or educate their oppressors. There is no reason to feel guilty about not wanting to engage in the extra, taxing, often uncompensated intellectual and emotional labor of educating people on their problematic behaviors. While it is a kind, generous thing to do, we don't owe it to anyone. We deserve self-care, and that might look like not educating. I chose to do this work, so you can ask me questions, but I wouldn't assume that every person who looks like me is willing to answer those questions. You should assume today that they're really tired and they're just looking for some wine and a way out of work because it has been a week. Okay, so what is the number one reason that marginalized communities in the US are in fact marginalized? Slavery. That's always going to be the answer because that is the inception of this country. The inception of the illegal occupation of this country, but whatever. So we start with race because slavery was our original sin. And oftentimes people are unclear about just how recent most of these things were and just how much they impact so much of what we do today. And so this is a timeline, and my presentation will be available to anybody, but you can just Google and find this, a timeline of significant events from 1619, which is when the first kidnapped Africans were brought ashore to the colonies. Well, it wasn't a colony, to the Americas, up until about 2016. And as you can see, this is 1965. My mother was a little kid then. And my grandmother was born somewhere here. So neither of those people could vote. We're just not that far away from those things. So there's a need for us to reframe progress into being impressed with people having done so well in such a short time, as opposed to why haven't these folks figured it out? I'm also aware that I'm preaching to the choir in this workshop, but just in case I'm not. So this is a quote from a writer at Medium, or part of a quote. And because this is back to why we start with slavery. And because the reality is that white oppression is one of the most resilient and adaptive social forces in all of human history, every time we think that we've finally given up white supremacy, it reinvents itself. And this is the really, really important part about this. Each successive iteration is more subtle, more invisible than the last. There is an imperative need for it to be subtle and invisible, because if you can't see it, then you can't name it. And if you can't name it, you can't fix it. And if you can't fix it, it persists. So it does take many shapes and many forms. So who am I? So I grew up in poverty. I hate saying that, but it's just the truth, you know. I'm from South Central, which is why I'm here today, dropping off my kid for the summer so I can actually do my job and not also teach. I wasn't raised by parents. My mother was on drugs. I don't know my father, but I was lucky enough to attend an amazing high school. I went to Long Beach Poly and went to a great college. I went to Tuskegee. I was the first in my family to go to college. I'm the only person in my family to earn a PhD. And I'm the only actual professor that most of my family members have ever met. I'm also a sufferer of imposter syndrome and stereotype threat and a victim of microaggression. How did I get here? Well, like I said, I went to a really good high school and I was in a magnet program. However, I don't think I needed to be in a magnet program. I was no smarter than anybody else. And when we do that, when we create these magnet programs, we're intellectually stratifying people very, very early. So GATE, whatever programs you're in as an elementary school kid, all of these things single out students of color and make us seem special and magical. When in reality, systems should be designed to invest in all students so that they all have similar opportunities, as opposed to plucking us out. So I thought that I knew when I went to college that my high school was a problem. So then I went to an HBCU, which is great for the confidence of a little Black girl. It did wonders. I got to be the definition of beauty and the definition of smart. And if I was a dope, it was just because I was a dope. It wasn't because I was Black. So that was a nice set of 4 years that was really, really protected that I appreciated. When I was there, I went to a talk about, I don't know, I think it was about PhDs, but I didn't even know what a PhD was. At that time, I didn't even know that my professors had PhDs. I knew we called them doctor stuff, but I didn't know because I was a first-gen kid. And so I went to this program that told us about PhDs and told us that you needed to do research in order to get one. But really, he told me that if I got a PhD and a JD, I could do patent law and make $100,000 a year. And as a poor kid, that was like, oh, well, yeah, where do I sign up for that? How do I do that? And so I knew how to do school really well. And all I needed them to do was to tell me where I needed to go and what I needed to do, and I would get it done. And that's what happened. So I applied for all these summer programs, and I ended up going to the one at the University of Michigan. And they did a fantastic job with helping us prepare for applying to graduate school. So I applied to grad school and was originally headed to UCLA, but I ended up at Michigan. This is another important turning point, because the reason I did not go to UCLA, which I don't think I've said out loud in a public forum yet, but I don't care because I'm way past caring, is that I reached out to someone there. Nobody reached out to me to recruit me, right? So I actually reached out because I was very nervous. I hadn't been in an environment where I was going to be the only Black person and probably the only person of color for miles in a really long time. And whoever I reached out to kind of blew me off and didn't really respond. And so I changed my mind and I decided to go to Michigan because they did. They reached out. They were interested. They cared. And that's how I ended up there. The rest of the talk will really be about student success and retention, but this is a point about recruitment, that you lose really good students. I think I turned out okay. I ended up at Michigan partway through my degree. So my fourth year, my PI got a position at BU, and so we relocated. I was already past classes, so it was easy to just fly back and forth for committee meetings, although in the age of Zoom, I guess I would have just had my committee meetings on Zoom. So I graduated from University of Michigan in 2009, and then I did a short-lived postdoc, which I'll talk a little bit about in a second, at University of Maryland Medical School. It was very short-lived. And then I lucked up on a faculty position at Fort Valley State University, which is down in Georgia. It's an HBCU, primarily undergraduate. And it just so happened that I was leaving my postdoc and I was like, I'm gonna go teach. And they had gotten stiffed by an adjunct who decided they didn't want to work there anymore. And so they kind of left them in a lurch. And so when I happened to reach out, the stars aligned. And so I was able to start there. Teaching at a primarily undergraduate institution required some creativity. So there's a link here to, let's see if it'll open. So we didn't have a lot of resources, so I had to get creative. And so we got a horse trailer once and we went down to the USDA and we got lab equipment and lab supplies, and we were able to set up a lab. I ended up taking students to Iowa State University a few summers and Georgia State University to be able to give them the training that they need that I didn't necessarily get. And then they participated in workshops and they did really good. So you all can go see that on your own time. But I wanted to share that because it wasn't as straightforward as one might think. So anyway, I left the classroom because one of the things Dr. Keene mentioned was that students, our charge as faculty is to teach students how to be independent thinkers. They want you to tutor them into the right answer. That is hard. And so it got to be a little bit less fun, I think. And so, where are we? Oh, here we go. It got to be a little bit less fun. So I was like, I think I'm going to try something new. Turns out when you are, am I presenting? I think so. I don't know if I'm in presentation, but I guess it's okay. When you are used to being in the classroom, you don't really know how to apply for a real job. So it took some time, but I was able to figure it out. And I got a job as the assistant director of the Undergraduate Research Center for Sciences at UCLA. And that was a really big turning point for me because it allowed me to motivate undergraduate students without being responsible for their learning per se. And I really did enjoy that. That also I reached a peak because I spent a lot of time in that position convincing students about why they should go to graduate school, when it turns out I really cared about what happened once they got there. And so that's how I ended up leaving UCLA to become the graduate diversity officer at UC Davis. And that here in this position, I get to work with students and who are already in grad school. And I really like that a lot. I like the idea of helping them see the pathway towards what it is that they want to do, helping them navigate the complex relationships with their PIs, all of those things. Okay, so I'm going to try and quickly go through this because I've got a few more things that I want to be able to say to you. So there are several notable experiences that have shaped my trajectory. And the reason I find them important to note is because I know there are graduate students on the call and probably postdocs who are trying to figure out where to go, what to do, and also if I'm going to be an ally, what is the experience of the people to whom I'm supposed to be an ally? What does that even look like? So if you don't have in-depth insight, I'm going to give you some insight on mine, and then it should hopefully shape some of your thoughts about how you can be a support. So my high school was great, but it was intellectually stratified. And because it was intellectually stratified, the hierarchy was evident in terms of treatment by the leadership. So my high school counselor told me to go to community college when I wanted to apply to UCLA. And when I finally did select Tuskegee to go to, my English teacher was like, why are you going to that Black school? So that left an indelible mark. I never forgot that. And once I got my PhD, I definitely went back and said, hey, hi, here I am. When I was in college, it was okay. That was a good experience. I was poured into very well. That's one of the advantages of going to an HBCU as a Black student. In fact, that's actually one of the advantages of going to an HBCU, no matter what student you are. Data has shown that lots of students who aren't Black are starting to seek out HBCUs because they figured out that the learning happens in the kind of nurturing environment that they like. So I already told you about the college workshop on patent law and PhDs that motivated me to get a PhD. I don't have one of those, oh, I grew up loving science stories. I have loved science. I've always been good at it. But really, when you're poor, you're thinking about what job can I get that will help me provide for myself when I leave here. And so that was my motivation. I did a graduate rotation. I did several, like many people do in STEM. One of my rotation advisors wrote on my I had trouble. So I had trouble in my cell biology class, which is ironic because I quite love cell biology, but I couldn't quite get the swing of how you learn in grad school. And so I had some trouble, and I told her I needed a couple of weeks to like come in lab a little less so I could focus on my work, my schoolwork. But keep in mind that labs and schoolwork are not automatically connected. But in my review, my evaluation, she wrote that I came to her with less experience or less skills than most people, that I struggled in my classes, and that when I got nervous, I lapsed into a quote unquote California girl like demeanor that did a disservice to my intellect. Again, I never forgot that. I don't think she said that about any of her other students. These are the experiences that your colleagues are having. When I was a graduate student, it was time for me to look for postdocs. I had a peer graduate student who was not a person of color. They were the same stage as me. We started in the lab together, so we were about to finish together. That person asked for support finding a postdoc and got one. I asked for support, and I was told that my PI didn't know anyone. So I had to figure that out by myself. So I got a lot of very prestigious postdocs, and one that was maybe less prestigious, but because I had no mentorship, I chose the one that was the least prestigious, and I ended up leaving after 3 months because she said that maybe I needed to just do, what did she call it? Translational research, because she didn't think I would be a good bench researcher. So I took that to mean I better go. Again, I don't think these kinds of things are I don't know if people know that these are the kinds of things that your colleagues or your peers are hearing from people who are supposed to be mentoring them. So I left the postdoc. I became faculty, and I've told you how I ended up out of the faculty role and into the administrative role. So moving on. So when we're talking about how to support students of color on campus, first-gen students from historically excluded populations, what is our goal? Like, are we trying to get more of those students into the school? Are we trying to get them into academic positions? Are we going to support them once they're there so that they can finish? What is it? And I think we can't really talk about pipelines, for lack of a better term, or anything until we pick a goal and stick to it. The goal of recruitment is very different from the goal of retention. Retention means student success. And any solutions that are going to tend to that are going to make the experience of these students better, must be direct, actionable, and measurable, just like a scientific experiment. So I'm just going to go really quickly through. Can someone tell me where I am on time? I'm not able to keep track.
I believe about 8 minutes left for the talking.
Oh, okay.
For Q&A.
Okay, that's perfect. Okay, so I asked this question to a group of Black women and femme PhDs. I run a group called Black Girl Doctorate, and I asked them this question last year. And I said, when selecting a graduate school, was there a school you considered but they did a poor job recruiting you? How did they fail? Now, this is a question about recruitment, but the answers are really, really telling. So just a warning, they're raw and honest, so I don't want anybody to be surprised. So this person said, during the interview visit, I was treated like I was lazy and just wanted a free ride. That happens not just at the interview. If a person feels like that at the interview, when they get there, the sentiment doesn't go away, right? If you happen to be selected. The second person said, I later did a fellowship at the school that I didn't attend. What I found was that students were miserable. They all hated the place because they were made to feel small all the time. The place had a great reputation for training to the outside scientific community, but that was only because the students were retained at all costs to prop up their outcomes. And then the third person said, during a visit to my top choice, they grilled and quizzed students like a candidacy exam about their previous research experience. And recently, I heard they now surprise students by making them give a chalk talk presentation of their research. The feeling of having to prove oneself in a style rooted in intellectual superiority felt wrong. In general, an institution can lose a really good student if the student is made to feel that they have to continuously prove how smart they are to be worthy for admission. All of these things remain true once we get to these institutions. And what I'm saying to those of you who are listening, for whom this is not your experience, this is what your peers are experiencing. So when you're thinking about how to be an ally, the first step really might just be finding out what the experiences are, and believing the students when they tell you, or your postdoc colleagues when they tell you, because it is sometimes so unbelievable that I don't think people believe it. So though unscientific, the responses were eye-opening with regards to the need for improving graduate student experiences as a whole. These experiences weren't particularly unique. So what do we do? My job as the Graduate Diversity Officer is to provide leadership to deans, faculty, academic programs, whoever wants it, to develop and implement recruitment and retention strategies that eliminate barriers for students from historically excluded populations. I advise, counsel, this is all on the website. I mean, I put it there, but this is on the website. So you can all go and check on the Grad Studies website. I advise, counsel, advocate for, develop programs for whatever needs to be done to ensure that the students who are here have a good experience. That is my actual job description. My personal vision is to use my experience, ignore the pipeline word. I mean, I put it in there because we're talking about pipelines, but you know. Anyway, to use my experience in program development and student engagement to continue building a diverse pipeline to UC Davis graduate programs, and to enhance the diversity in STEM graduate programs by increasing the number of students in developing and enhancing programs that promote inclusion. I really care a lot about inclusion because it's one thing to be asked to the party, but if you're not asked to dance, what's the point, right? And so that's my my goal. And so literature has shown that inclusion is good not only for student success, but it actually is really good for recruiting. So when we're talking about increasing numbers, if students feel like they're a part of the fabric of the institution, they often will go back and report their experiences to their friends, to their colleagues, to their classmates at their old institutions. And so these are the things that we need to do. We need to ensure that people are having a good experience on campus so that when they leave, they are good advertisement for us. Not that that's the only reason. So I know I'm running out of time, but the fourth year itch is something that if you're on here and you're a grad student or a postdoc, you know what it is, which is that everything you've done in your life has been for 4 years up to this point. So after the fourth year of grad school, you're like, what in the world am I supposed to do? What do I do? I've never stopped anything. So anyway, I'll just scoot past that a little bit. So in terms of creating, no, I want to make sure we get, okay. So my efforts on campus include, I've started hosting weekly or bi-weekly community dinners for students, URM students in STEM. They're on Tuesday nights. The next one is coming up next Tuesday. So if you know anyone, I'll be sending out the flyer after the conference. The Graduate Center at Walker Hall should be opening this fall, whether or not we're on campus. And so we can, I just read one of the questions in the chat. That was cute. When Walker Hall opens, we plan to have several activities that are going to specifically be geared towards ensuring that the students from those communities feel included and are able to participate and feel like they have a home and a place to go. I'm always in the midst of grant writing efforts. I just got a rejection for one grant, but I don't care. I'm going to keep writing them. And I'm writing grants to develop programs that provide student support over the course of the entire 5 years of graduate school, whereas many programs or many organizations will fund the first 2 years or the last 3 years. I think there's support that's needed from, as I like to say, the rooter to the tutor. So from the day you SIR yes to the time you ring the bell in graduate studies that says you're done. So I'm working on those kind of efforts. I do workshops, I do seminars like these. When I'm asked to, I typically do them. And then of course, individual mentorship. I participate in the GSOC, which is Graduate Students of Color program. So I mentor 3 students there, but also my door is always open for mentorship for students outside of that program. So my final thoughts before I show you all the resources that I will leave you with is that, you know, it may be impractical to change everything all at once, but it's imperative that you recognize that the lack of diversity in your everyday life undoubtedly shapes your thoughts and interactions with people who are different from you. Recognizing and owning this truth will make it much easier for you to be an ally to oppressed people because you won't be leading with your own assumptions. Rather, you will lead with an empathetic and curious disposition. You can start by asking those you serve, oh, there's typos there, but you can ask the folks in your space, what do you need? How can I best be of service to you? By recognizing your own identity within the power structures of the organization and this country, you're better able to meet people where they are within the structure and serve as an effective ally. When you want to go to a restaurant, you do not call them and ask them for directions. Instead, you typically Google. Keep this energy whenever you're thinking about being a good ally. Google it. If you are trying to figure out how to do that, there are activities that you can look for. There's some on campus. There are things all throughout Sacramento and probably Davis. Read works by authors of color. That's really important. Learn the actual history of this country and how slavery, capitalism, patriarchy directly tie into modern day policing and legal discrimination. And that's against all people. So it's slavery and patriarchy and capitalism don't just disadvantage Black people. They disadvantage all the people in this country. And then join or create diversity committees within your respective departments. If you don't have one, there are several student-led diversity committees in various departments, so you can partner with those students to get support for developing your own efforts in your own individual departments. So this is a list of a ton of resources. They're all pretty easy. One of them is an actual syllabus. And because we're at home and it's about to be summer, you might even have time to go through the syllabus, but it's called, it's on activisthistory.com, which is a nicely curated syllabus on how to, or on works and literature by scholars of color that will give you the background that you need. I know that as researchers, we're not always comfortable talking about things that we are not experts on, but you know, you're just gonna have to get comfortable with the discomfort, because if you don't, the state of affairs as we see them today will remain. And then there's this really cool video by April Rain on inclusion versus diversity that I think everyone would benefit from. taking a listen to. And with that, I will say, are there any questions?
Thank you so much, Devin.
No problem.
I guess we could move right into the Q&A.
Yeah. Let me stop sharing. Share. Okay. Oh gosh, there's so many.
I think it starts from Alexa sent at 2:17.
Okay, got it. I'm wondering how separable success and recruitment really are. I imagine success in recruitment is highly based on perceived potential for success. If you or M's have more examples of success from a STEM program, they would be more inclined to participate. well, okay. So there is a relationship between, no, that's not true. So it depends. You do need a more diverse faculty so that you can have students seeing people who look like them who do well. But that is assuming, again, that the end of the pipeline is academia. And we can't really be making that assumption. There are people out there who can teach, who can be faculty, who can serve. The institution probably has to tend to that at the level of hiring, more so than just increasing the number of students that get there. I don't think they're necessarily totally inseparable because it is difficult to be isolated on campus. But when we're talking about just Black students, I mean, we don't even make up 13% of the population of the country. So you can only recruit but so many in there, right? So it has to be more than just recruitment. It just has to be. It has to be about inclusivity and making sure that people are valued and that their experiences are valued. Would it be possible to share those links in the chat? Oh, there's a lot of links. Will something go out after this where we can share them? Because it's a slide full of them. My presentation is accessible to anybody who wants it.
Yeah, so we are compiling, we already have a big list of resources, and anything that's mentioned here in this workshop, we will be adding to it, and we will be sharing that with everyone after the seminar.
Okay. All right. Let's see. Wait, they're coming in too quick. All right, 217. Regarding action items, hearing your story is really encouraging and amazing and can really help many of us who can relate Phil to imposter syndrome. Yes. Confidence. Oh, wait. I'm losing them. Oh, here we go. Is there a way we can collect stories like yours from UC Davis profs? So here's the thing. I know that it's beneficial, but I don't think a parade of sad stories is the way to go. I shared that because the request for this talk was tell us about your journey, but I don't lead with that most of the time because it isn't fun. And I don't think that's the most appropriate approach. I think doing the reading and doing the investigating and figuring out the things would be much more beneficial than having a parade of our misery to make you feel like, yeah, that was hard for them and thus I should do better. I will say, I do think it's important for faculty to talk about their failures. So I like the idea of the chemistry professor talking about getting the F in chemistry. I always talked about technically I got a C in biology, but it was still not a passing grade for grad school, and it's equivalent to an F. So you have to share that. Your students should know that you're human and fallible. But I just don't know that would be the appropriate way to, that's not the best way to go towards action items. Oh, thank you. Y'all are sweet. As current students, we're genuinely, oh wait, they keep going away. Where do we go? Okay. Okay, I feel like I'm missing one. But as academics of privilege, how can we better support URM students with imposter syndrome and confidence when the model that we personally present is of the person that's generally been told, generally told they belong? I mean, I think it should be noted that students, the population of people I'm talking about, aren't that different from everyone else in terms of needs. They're pretty basic, right? Human needs are pretty basic. So what would you need if you were having imposter syndrome? What would you need if someone had said these kinds of things to you? We don't need something special. We need the same empathy that you extend to people who you are familiar with, extended to us. So I don't need extra. I just need whatever you already give. Right now we're in a deficit. So if you have someone who has imposter syndrome, encourage them to volunteer or to mentor, because oftentimes when you mentor someone else or when you're tutoring someone else, you gain confidence, and that will help dispel some of the imposter syndrome. Make sure that they belong, invite them along to things. Or one of the things that happened when I was in grad school is that they kept pressuring me to drink beer, but I didn't grow up in a house that drank beer. I didn't even grow up in a house that drank. So I just didn't drink it. But there was a lot of picking because I didn't drink beer. And they didn't take it as cultural because they were all of the same culture. And I'm like, but beer tastes like pee. I'm not drinking it now. I've since changed my mind. I definitely drink beer. However, it was 5 years of graduate school pressure, and I did not start in grad school. It wasn't a thing. I started after. And so, it's being the person to say, hey, well, you don't drink beer. What did you all drink when you were growing up? Right? What did your parents drink? Like, how did you all celebrate? Not assuming that the majority is default. Let's see. What role can a department diversity committee play to be most effective in supporting recruitment, retention, and success? Well, I think having advocating to have one or two students on the admissions committee is really good, because something about having the students on there really has an impact. The students tend to be really charged about it. There are resources we have on our website. We have resources, and I think DEI also has resources for what it looks like to engage in holistic review at the graduate level. I am working with Julie Passault, who's out of USC, who's written a number of books about inclusive graduate education. And so we're going to be doing some faculty trainings starting this fall. I just remembered I didn't respond to a doodle poll that I need to respond to about that. But yes, we're holding workshops for faculty this fall. And then on campus, we already hold workshops for faculty. But I think what the student diversity committees can do is sort of keep the pressure on to make sure that these things are happening. Ask questions about the process. Advocate for changes that you feel like you need. The group in ecology has done an amazing job, so they would be the gold standard, I think, in terms of if you want to model any committee that you come up with after someone. Their group has done really, really well. Oh, good, very good. Okay, some of these are private. Regarding mentorship, seems like minority faculty members are asked to take on more than their fair share of mentees, but at the same time, it seems to be helpful for minority students to be mentored by someone who's shared their experience. Is there a way to resolve this? Yes, be better. The reason that they go to them is because everybody else is not better. We know when we come into grad school that there's only going to be one or two faculty of color, right, within our department. And we're looking at them like, I want to go, but I know they're overworked, but I need this. And so you kind of make a decision like, well, they're either going to tell me yes or no, and then you do it. It's incumbent upon their faculty colleagues to become versed and to become so versed in the things that students need that those 2 or 3 faculty of color can say to their student, hey, listen, I can't help you right now, but these 2 faculty are really good. They're allies, and they will be supportive, and they will get you where you need to be. And the student will trust that faculty person, and then you're unloading some of it. But that requires some educating. It requires having some hard conversations with yourself, some unlearning, some de-racism in your brain. It's a lot of work. But if you're committed to, and it's a continuum of work. You don't just do it and like wake up tomorrow and you're like, I'm anti-racist now, I'm gonna go mentor all the little Black kids. It doesn't work like that. But what you do is you work at it and you demonstrate your commitment so that those faculty colleagues then recommend you. And over time, your reputation just becomes as a person who's an ally and a good resource. And there are plenty of folks like that on Davis's campus. They've done well. There are plenty of them. When you said you pursued graduate degree without a burning passion for science, what do you have for students who want to pursue a graduate degree and their chances of bringing their family out of poverty? So I mostly do things I'm good at. Don't be like me, be better. But I do things that I'm good at. I was good at science. I'm curious. I want to know. I just don't want to be at a bench doing it, is what I figured out. But I am very curious. And I love like the inner workings of the cell. I love the idea that, you know, I really enjoyed teaching cellular respiration, for example, because I would talk to students about the relationship between a tree and like glucose, right? Like how all of this works and this exchange. I loved all that. I just didn't want to do it as my job. Science at a bench can be very isolating. So I don't know how I stayed motivated. Baked Cheetos and wine. I don't know. I don't want to lie to you, but it was tough. It was tough. And it was tough. I enjoyed graduate school because you kind of get to play in a way. You get to ask all these questions and there's the pressure to answer the questions correctly or you know, produce big things is different from when you're faculty. When you're faculty, you've got to produce like big things. So I enjoyed graduate school. It was hard and it was a little bit a torture, but mostly it was good. I had a really good support network and I went to therapy and I continue to go to therapy. So find yourself some friends and a good therapist. And I highly encourage that if you want to stay motivated. Is that a question? Okay. Oh, my question though isn't, oh, here we go. Thank you so much for your presentation. It was incredible. I have a question that more directly relates to all the discussion going on right now in the community about racism and Black Lives Matter. I keep hearing the recommendation this week to not ask Black colleagues for help in leading discussions on racism. That completely makes sense. It does not fall on the shoulders of the oppressed to educate the oppressors, and this is an incredibly traumatizing time. My question is though, isn't it offensive not to ask a Black colleague if they have any readings or anything to share that resonate? For example, if all the men, no. So it's back to my restaurant example. If you want to go to McDonald's, you don't call McDonald's and ask them how to get there. You Google it. You Google Maps it. You MapQuest it. You figure it out. There are enough resources that you don't have to ask your Black colleagues. Because really, and my job includes the title diversity, but even I checked out because I was like, it's just too much. I need time to pause and grieve and process before I'm able to be of any use to anybody. So I had to check out. So no, it isn't offensive. When I wanted to learn about Black history, because I didn't major in it, and it's not like this country was brimming over the top trying to teach it to me, I had to go figure it out. I had to go dig it up. I had to go find books. I asked questions of scholars, not necessarily scholars who happen to be Black. There are lots of places to find the information. And I think when you're doing research as a research student, you go looking for it. So consider this a research project and go looking for it. And some of the stuff you find will be good, some of it will be crap, but you're a researcher. You can be discerning. For the sake of staying on track, please. Oh, okay, yep, that's it.
Thank you everyone for a great discussion. I think we're gonna go ahead and move on to the next session.